Hi, Koen. Very happy to see you. How are you doing?
Hey Cedric, it's the start of the new year. Typically, you always see it maybe has some ease at the start of the year, but this year, 2024, I haven't seen it. So we are in full motion. So it's going well on my side. How are things on your end?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much. It's quite busy as well. A lot of changes in the market, as you know, and we're going to talk about those changes in the market, right? So we're going to talk about the GTM go to market and the importance in choosing what motions we're going to take and so forth. Koen, before we start, why don't you introduce yourself?
I would love. Yeah, thanks. Koen, live in Haarlem. I'm now 12 years in SaaS software sales. So I've seen uh, quite a lot of different GTM motions all across the different years and also the different industries and different segments I've been working at. But I really started out in 2012 together with a business owner when we had like an very junior MVP product and trying
Mhm.
to bring this towards the, let's say, the Benelux market. And across the years, every time I stepped up my game slightly when it comes from really early stage startups towards like more scale ups, and eventually ended up with a company called Personio, where we're now eventually already at Series E or second round Series E. 2,000 people serving over 13,000 customers in Europe and pre-IPO. So I've seen all different kind of stages. But like I said, what was always very interesting is also I've seen like all different kind of GTM motions and typically as well like that any company regardless the size have too many of those GTM motions because they're always trying to figure out what is working best and how soon am I going to add an extra layer of a GTM motion.
Yeah.
So super interesting to see in all those different companies and industries.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so interested to talk about the GTM motions, because as you said, there are often too many within one organizations. But let's start with the basics. So, what is GTM and what is the GTM motion?
Yeah, it's actually good. I mean, that's always a nice thing. In SaaS, we talk too much about all those abbreviations, like a go-to-market strategy. And like,
Yes.
I think if you ask five different people when it comes to GTM or go-to-market motion, I think everyone talks differently about this. But I think
Hmm.
in general, and everyone can highly relate. I think towards if we really want to differentiate a few GTM motions, I think product-led growth (PLG) is quite familiar. Last year, still this year, you see a lot of still companies are trying to get into the PLG motion. I think another one which we are all really familiar with is like just the inbound motion,
Yeah.
trying with all kind of education to attract eventually customers that they will get towards us rather than, and that's the third one, outbound, trying to see like, hey, who potentially, based on my ICP, ideal customer profile, can be an
Hmm.
ideal fit for our solution, and we're going out and see if we can attract them to start a conversation. And I think what is interesting is that I mean, if you really talk about this matter, that you see more and more of those motions. Um, for those, I mean, I'm a really big fan, for instance, by Winning by Design, and they have like a certain description of a GTM motion. But then I follow a company, and I can highly recommend actually for everyone GTMpartners.com. Also, really an interesting organization who helps scaling GTM motions. And they actually talk about sure, you have PLG, you have inbound, you have outbound, but also more and more the partner GTM motion or the community led GTM motion or the event led. They even make a distinction between event and community led.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, more and more of those motions pop up. And again, like you already said, too many of those organizations try all or at least three or four. I think I read a poll on LinkedIn lately that is between a lot of companies have between three or four of those motions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's an interesting one.
Yeah, because you need to invest in any of them, and I think that's people underestimate everything. Like even if you look at the partner model, you have a lot of people that think, yeah, I'm gonna sign up a couple of resellers, but then they forget the support, the onboarding, the program, the marketing through channels. So, and this is just for one GTM motion. So, how do you start, and how do you decide what GTM motion is the right for you?
Yeah. I think it's eventually also very important to understand to eventually who are you selling,
Yeah.
and I think you also need to define like, okay, go to market, but again, what does it mean from a region perspective, from an industry perspective, from a segment perspective? Are we selling to SMB? Are we selling to mid market?
Hmm.
Are we selling to enterprise, or are we selling to technical ICP, so ideal customer profiles, or is it more people who are more like marketeers or salespeople, or for instance myself to HR? So I think at all cases, it's very important to understand first, like, hey, what is my ICP, and where do I have potentially the first traction of? Because that's also what you see, right? I mean, if you start a GTM motion, I think everyone to some extent tries to build the inbound motion. I
Hmm.
mean, you do some marketing advertising online, and you see if it attracts any kind of customer, and then you try, of course, through your sales funnel or through your GTM funnel, you're trying to convert that customer. And again, I think to myself, and I have become really good, but more interested in like understanding the metrics along the way. So, do you see trends quarter over quarter? Do you see if that really works before you even considering a next motion? Because of course, as you said, partner or event or community, I think it sounds super interesting, but it's super labor intensive. And
Exactly.
if you haven't found the right ICP, who can you bring to your events? Who can you bring towards building your community? And who how can you leverage partner-led GTM motions if you
Hmm.
actually haven't found yourself what is the right ICP and what is repeatable? So I think again, like the inbound and somehow the outbound, these are quite typical motions where, to be honest, I think, I don't know how you've also seen multiple startups and scale-ups. I guess any of them are doing somehow the inbound and the outbound motion, correct?
Yeah, that's true. What is my experience that everybody is overestimating how much revenue inbound will bring. So then, if one GTM does not work, in your opinion, what would then be the moment either to change a
Mhm.
GTM or to kill off a GTM and to find an alternative?
I was listening on a podcast that was like actually Dave from Winning by Design. And he actually mentioned, but I think this is really difficult. He said like, sure, at the beginning you will experiment with a few of those motions, and you see at least some positive signals in which you see some repeatability.
Yeah.
But actually, you should focus on a GTM motion. Let's say it's an inbound for SMB or for mid market, and typically you see then you have like a two stage where you have an SDR and an AE who actually follow up those inbound leads, and then it goes to the AE closes, and then it goes to customer success. But
Mhm.
he actually says that you should be at 10 million ARR before you truly consider an additional GTM motion, because again, like it costs a lot of different resources, plan of attack, go to market strategy, also with assisting marketing, but also your post sales motion to serve those customers. So he just made the example, and you see that a lot, like a company who starts with SMB, and then all of a sudden says like, okay, we have some initial traction, and let's say it's an SMB up to 15 or 20K ACV, and then I move towards enterprise. And all of a sudden, I want to sell towards 100K ACV. But the
Yeah.
expectations, both from your product, as well from your marketing and your education, as well as from a server's perspective, is obviously totally different. So
Yeah.
how can you make sure that the people who are actually used to an SMB motion all of a sudden can also fit the enterprise motion?
Yeah.
Typically, that means that you need to invest in like additional resources, and you cut those both GTM motions entirely from each other, and you run two in parallel. But it's a very expensive endeavor, especially for startups.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to have, let's say, early positive signals, is it really working? Yes or no?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, good one. I also saw this, and 10 million, I mean, in European context, I felt it was a bit a lot, especially if you see you have like startups,
Yeah.
they struggle to get even to the 1 million. So what do you think about this? I mean,
Well,
one,
yeah, same
yeah,
here. I don't know if you know, I don't know. I'm actually very curious to watch the stats in Europe, like how many of startups and scale-ups are actually post 10 million ARR. I do
exactly.
believe that the majority which we have, and it's different in the States, are not like past the 10 million ARR.
Yeah.
And again, from all the companies and like the last 3 ones I've been was European scale-ups I've seen. And especially, let's say, also the ones where I was responsible for. So there was typically in the range 10 million or 1 to 15 or max 20 million ARR. We were actually always running the inbound motion and an outbound motion. Or let's say, for instance, what we also running now currently within Personio in the Benelux, we are really like this SMB motion up to, what is it? Quite quickly, 30K MRR, 30K ACV, and we have a slightly more mid-market motion of up to 80, 100K ACV. But we really trying to indeed deviate those one, like the SDRs, the AEs, but also marketing and also our customer success. These are different type of expertise, different type of experience, and we're trying to separate those ones in like, yeah, I call it pods or at least teams who are collaborating across like all the different departments.
And when you talk about changing the GTM, so if you go from mid-market to enterprise, what I notice is that if you do it with the same people, a lot of people will struggle because the motions are different, the contact people are different. So
Yeah.
how can you guide your teams into moving into that different GTM?
It's very difficult for people who don't have any experience, let's say. And again, like enterprise, I think we've talked before, like last year together, like how do we define enterprise? I mean, everyone is like, okay, I'm enterprise account executive. But like if you truly talk enterprise, you talk about more complex and longer sales cycles,
Yeah.
meaning always more different stakeholders involved. And with all respect, but if you've done like SMB sales for, let's say, a larger brand, any well-known brand in Belgium, the Netherlands, or in Europe, or in the US, come on, it is a kind of easy sale to do. I mean, you have the brand, you have good product, you have like all the blows and whistles to help you succeed. But if you go into enterprise, I mean, it's a more difficult play. I will say you are the project manager in a complex play, and you need to make sure that you have your internal team allocated, your external team, meaning partners and customers, because you need to make sure that those are in your team to sell internally into your ideal prospect, like how they can sell this internally towards like the economic buyer or at least the management. So those are so much different from each other, SMB and enterprise. So I made a mistake, like hiring people who has previous SMB experience and who were really coachable and I think eager enough just to make the next step. But going from again like a 15 or 20K ACV towards 100K plus, or even in my previous company, 250K, 500K, up to 1 million ACV, totally different set of skills needed to get there. So if you really, I think, and again, I'm very curious how you see this, but if you want to build any kind of a mid-market or enterprise motion, I would not say like if you are from SMB, start something enterprise because it's just too far off from each other. Doesn't make much sense. But if you have, yeah, you really need to have some proper experience, people who have done it before and understand how you can scale this, because otherwise it will most likely take way too long before you see the first positive impact. And obviously everything comes with time and investment, and it's always the case, how long do you get the time to show any kind of return of investment?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, people coming from mid-market when the sales cycles are so much shorter, most of them are trying to get the sale as soon as possible. And as I said, it is a different skill set. It is project management. It's a completely different set of steps you need to take to get into that sale. I mean, I was recently involved into a deal, and even the vendor sign up, even this was a completely separate process. And if you then or with an inexperienced account manager, then you run a couple of processes ahead of where the other steps are. So it's a really different ball game.
Yeah.
Therefore,
For
yeah,
sure.
therefore.
No, again, like you said, like with complexity, it also comes, you need to understand the different kind of internal selling cycles that are running, because of course you're selling maybe towards the business and you want to have like the showing more like the product operational, what the impact it can
Mhm.
have for the business who is going to use your
Yeah.
solution. But then
But
you always
internally,
have the entire security checks, you have like other
yeah,
procurement layers, you have
yeah,
IT, and you have also, it's operational. Let's see if this, let's say, tooling works the right way.
yeah,
is it the right way integrated? But also then you have your commercials, and you really need to make sure that you have those internal conversations parallel towards each other. Otherwise, your sales cycle will be most likely 2 or 2 times or 3 times longer than ideal. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
you need that experience. That's quite clear.
Yeah. And internally as well, right? So enterprise game is much more collaborative, and if you
Yeah.
want to allocate all your technical resources on all your own projects as a new AE or enterprise AE, then you'll definitely run hit your head against the wall. So it needs to be very aligned in all the different the aspects, much more than having that transactional high activity setup of a
Yeah,
mid-market.
and one thing there, what I also see, and I think it also comes to one of the topics which we also want to discuss today, like when it comes to really, if you ask me, like GTM motions of the future or like 2024, it's also a little bit about like your it's not only your EQ, it's also your AQ, like the emotional how you can really understand how you can sell it internally towards your solution engineer, to your manager, or towards other executive sponsorships to really help you on your deal. Because again, like if you pull them in and you do actually a very shitty job and you don't win this deal, maybe the next time they don't want to want to be involved in your deal. And the same thing comes with the different stakeholders inside the prospect you're selling to. You need to build a bond, and especially when it comes to enterprise, it's multiple champions. Meaning you need to build this relationship with them. And again, then we have always the third angle, and that's what I actually always love as when it comes to more complex sales, is how I'm going to leverage my ecosystem of partners. Meaning it can be consultancy partners, it can be ISV system integrators, it can be more and more what you also see, of course, in SaaS is the ecosystem of tech partners, so complementary products towards your product, who maybe is already a vendor within the company you're selling to, and how are you going to leverage those partners to become more credible selling towards your ideal prospect, your ideal prospect.
Yeah. So on the previous point, actually one of my biggest losses was I lost a 5 million euro deal. The client was almost
That hurts.
begging, almost begging uh, that we participate, and internally, pre-sales decided they didn't want to collaborate with that client because they have lost previous bids for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I did not manage to sell the project internally, and this costs me and the company quite some money. So it is important being able to explain your business case inside your organization. I think that was a very big lesson for me.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, anyways, as long as you learn from those ones and you apply those learnings on your next sales cycles, I think that's not a problem.
Yeah.
And we need
It
to
was
learn it
very
out.
big. Yeah. But you covered slightly already the a new GTM motion, right? And you named it the near bounding. So what is this?
I mean, I think it's always like those marketing terminology which you're trying to apply on these things. And now I think I also recently I follow some podcast on Nearbound, and what is it actually? And it's not something which is new to me. NXT is always already existing, but I think it's going to be more and more important in 2024. Where what they as well say, and outbound, come on, everyone, especially with ChatGPT and all the AI, we can blow away like emails and messages. We can automate email of messages on LinkedIn. How can you stand out with like just purely text written outbound
Yeah.
initiatives? Sure, phone calls, but yeah, again, like I don't know how often you pick up the phone, but every time when someone calls me, and I'm not very important stakeholder, but I'm not picking up the phone if I don't see a number which I recognize. So good luck trying to get me on the phone. And I don't think it's else with let's say really higher stakeholders, and that's from an outbound perspective. So I think it becomes only more difficult to really stand out outbound. And then we look at inbound, and as you know as well, I mean, there's so much noise out there. Everyone wants to voice that they are different, but the problem is by everyone is voicing or trying to be different, everyone looks like each other. If you, for instance, look in an industry, and it's always a very nice test for yourself, and you go to like any kind of advertising or to a website, and all of a sudden you change your company name for your competitor name, and just see if the overall messaging is different. Typically, you see it's the same kind of messaging, And that means, hey, you are not different compared to your competitor. Meaning as well, it's difficult to stand out from an inbound perspective as well. And you see, oh,
Uh,
I got some
you have an
additional.
ISV
I got an
partner.
additional fan on the show.
Hey,
Um,
number 3,
and
mystery guest.
he can listen along. And so when you see as well, like people trying to differentiate with community or with podcast or with any of that, but also that can become so saturated that a lot of buyers think like, where do I really want to get my information? And
Yeah.
what you now more and more see, especially also with all those, let's say, group slacks, etc., is he agrees. But you see, of course, that you want to look for credible voices. So you go
Yeah.
into like Pavilion. I'm a member of Pavilion. If I want to buy some sales tooling or I'm interested in sales tooling, I'm going to ask for advice. So
Yeah.
those credible voices, peers, or indeed like the ecosystem of partners who potentially are already a vendor inside your ideal customer where you want to sell into, those partners, they are so important to you. And that's what they now call Nearbound. Because those partners, and I've plenty of examples in my current company and also in my previous company, they really help not only to get you, for instance, introduced, can you introduce me into that account? But it's also, can you tell me about what are their biggest priorities? Or can you sell me something, hey, you sold towards the same business unit?
Yeah.
Who are the right ones to talk to? Or maybe who are the negative voices in your previous cycle where I can learn from? And I think those kind of partners can give you so much interesting insights or eventually can help you get into those accounts. And one of the examples, and I don't think on this podcast I can't name all the names, but we were selling into a very large bank with our previous company. The only way to get into that account was by really partnering up with our strategic partner who could really not only introduce us into that account, but could tell us what is important and what kind of stakeholders we need to talk to. Without all that information, we could never, ever initially land such a big deal. And I see it nowadays as well on my side. I think I posted on this as well yesterday, is ecosystem partners. So also ourselves, we are an HR core platform, but we leverage or we connect with so many different tech partners. And now, I don't know, are you familiar with the tool Reveal?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I mean, that's like a highly recommend when you really talk about Nearbound. Reveal is this tool where you as a company, you can actually connect your CRM, so both your HubSpot or your Salesforce. Um, and what it allows on both sides is you can have like the granularity of, okay, what kind of data can I expose and share? And of course, it's all GDPR covered, but you can help each other understand in what kind of customers do you have, or what kind of is currently running in your sales cycle. And then you see like, hey, but they are already a customer. So there you can see they can really give you then insights on like, hey, this can be interesting, and you have some more information, or indeed they can make this introduction. So that's, I think, something you see now more and more, because obviously your prospect, they, if your partner is already vendor there for, let's say, 2 years, and they do deliver a great job, because otherwise most likely they're not 2-year vendor there, then they are willing to listen to their voices more than you as being a potential new vendor. So I think especially this Reveal, and you will, I think, see more tools of this popping up, but I think Reveal is one of the biggest one in the category of Nearbound. Will really help a lot of organizations become more credible and sell way better into your ideal accounts, other than, again, very noisy outbound and very noisy inbound.
And in what sense then is this different than a pure partner model?
And that's the thing. I mean, if you really look at partner, also there you have so many different motions, because you, of course, you have referral, you have reseller. It's like,
Yeah.
if you really ask me, and again, to me, partners and the partner ecosystem, again, like the old school partner led motions is indeed referral or reseller or all these kind of like kind of very formal partner agreements where you force with, or like you get 20% annual kickback or anything like that. Whereas eventually the entire setup of Nearbound and Reveal is not necessarily to monetize this directly. No, we are more willing to help and share information so we can eventually guide the customer in a better way. I mean, when you incentivize partners, refer resellers, there's really a strong incentive for me because when I'm selling, I'm earning money. But this is more like, hey, this is like really to help each other with like insights without, I think, and obviously you can monetize this and you can incentivize this, but not like directly to get something in return. There's more willingness to help, and eventually also to offer your customer or a prospect a more smoother buying journey. Because hey, if I come to you as a customer and I already get so much information about you, why I can way more tailor my pitch or at least my solution which I have, because I understand from discovery call what you're looking for, and I can way better tailor it to your needs. I think for you it's way, I mean, you will be way more open to have this conversation and eventually also to trust me. So it is a kind of like a mix between inbound outbound partner, I guess. But it is especially nowadays will become like a stronger type of GTM motion.
Yeah, and I'm curious though how you can roll this out organization wide, individual to individual. I definitely see a possibility.
Yeah.
At the same time, there won't be any equal trust across the organization to the other organization. That's a bit my feel. So I'm pretty sure it's can be effective.
Yeah.
If you're, for example, in Pavilion, maybe your other colleagues are not in Pavilion, so will somebody that is also partner of a Pavilion trust your colleague, for example? So that's a kind of a second layer of trust, and then should be built in then in the model.
No, yeah, no, and for sure. And this is like just one source of then information and
Yeah,
credibility.
yeah,
And like I said, for instance, those tools like Reveal and it's still, you have a little bit more information or more insights into that
yeah,
account.
yeah,
And I think the more credible the partner voice is, and the more trusted and the more there it comes, the nearer it is with your prospect,
yeah.
the higher the likelihood is that the given information or the type of advice given
Hmm.
will be seen as credible and will be maybe really considered, right? So the nearer that contact is towards that prospect, I think that's a really important factor. But again,
Yeah,
nowadays with LinkedIn, with all those connections, you know how important and how quickly, if you are in your first degree, and it really helps to get closer and nearer towards likely your ideal prospect.
yeah, yeah. So now, when selecting a GTM, right? So we spoke briefly before the recording that when you're leader of a region, maybe one go to market motion is suboptimal to roll out in your region than in other territories. For example, when I was living in Eastern Europe, it's an system integrator market. It's not an OEM market. So I decided against the global OEM market to start focusing on the system builders because the OEMs they had, as I said, 2%. So how do you make a case, or how do you start rolling out go-to-market motion that is not aligned with what headquarters either dictates or requires?
Yeah, it is difficult, right? So it all eventually comes down with your performance. So
Yeah,
um, I think what I like, and I think you're also familiar, for instance, always with Chris Walker from Refine Labs, and he also talks from a marketing perspective as well, like different stages before you can really scale like certain marketing programs. And I think
yeah,
what he always says in the first phase, I think that's like really his first phase. That's like these positive signals. You just define a few of those. Okay, what do I really see when I start testing, experimenting? And that will be always my advice. I mean, you should not like deviate from the standard or the default with full force. So I would always say, like, if this is in your company, it has proven worked in the home market. Hey, you will be stupid not to test that in your own market. So do that for the freaking 80%, but use 10 or 20% to some extent to experiment something new. And you should see always if you need to if you can do that with the same group of people, or you need to fully isolate this. I can remember, for instance, that in Team Leader, one of my previous companies where I worked, that every time when we went towards a new region from the HQ, we really started out with like one like digital marketeer with some advertising, and then if we saw it worked, like some positive signals, we started hiring a all-round AE, then eventually an SDR, then eventually a CSM, and we step by step we are building out this new function or this new region. And I think it's the same if you also, for myself, as being responsible more for the Benelux, if I want to testing out, show with some experiments. So, for instance, this Nearbound or this ecosystem of complementary products which we are having in our marketplace. That's something I'm investing quite some time in myself, because I do believe it not only helps with lead gen, it really helps converting my direct deals which I have in the funnel. And by just showing that it works, and then trying again, experiment. So keep it very lightweighted, and then you see some positive signals. Maybe you should spend some more time. Maybe you should start adding some events together. In this case, with the partner. And I was actually yesterday with one of our partners making the analysis after 1 year of partnership, and we saw on both sides we were each other's biggest partners. Because every time we iterated slightly, we improved the entire process, and then we started doing we added some more AEs from both sides, so they get to know each other and exchange information, and every time, step by step, we increased. And then obviously it's also making this business case or trying to sell internally, say like, listen, this is what we see now, this is what works. What do you think? And if you sell this internally quite well and the performance is there, obviously there are ears open to listen to this, but it all falls and comes down with like let's say positive performance over time.
So just to recap, because there are a bunch of interesting things there on how starting with the GTM. You said that 10 to 20% of the resources allocation, having some iterations, trying it for 1 or 2 quarters. If you look at traditional outbound sales sprints, we say about 2 week, 4 week, and then we can start earlier to start seeing trends, but to make decisions 2 to 4 weeks. What would be like your go-to market metric, to decide on this GTM is working, will work, has to be adjusted, or what?
Yeah, I think it also has to do, of course, with your cycle, right? I mean, how can you test something if you have like a cycle? Like for instance, in our mid-market offering, I think it can be sales cycle between 3 and 6 months, sometimes slightly even longer. I mean, then you can't really have some proper analysis if something works if you haven't done this for 6+ months. So you need to give that time, and eventually it's time, it's the resources, it's the money allocation. Because if you can test something really lightweight with hardly any financial investments, I mean, maybe you can see quite soon, you can see some positive outcomes and you can scale this. But let's say that you're really testing this GTM motion. What does it mean? Oh, sorry, the outbound motion. If you're really fully focused on inbound, most likely you will make sure that you have one, or actually you want to A/B test. So maybe you want to have put 2 reps, SDRs on outbound. I mean, I can't say in 3 months to this outbound person, it doesn't work. Sorry, we'll stop it. We need to iterate. We need to test it. Meaning as well, we need different tools or scripts or coaching or so. I think we need to be very careful what is needed, like time-wise, resource-wise, money-wise, to build this GTM motion. I think that's what a lot of people underestimate, especially from a community or event-led or a partner-led GTM motion, even an outbound motion. It costs a lot of time and resources before you see revenue impact. And that's, I think, very important in the days of 2024. We should not forget that it's revenue, but that's maybe on signing. Is it a customer who sees impact of your tool? And then it's very difficult to see lifetime value, right? I mean, you can't see that in 1 year. You really want to see that over multiple years. So I think that you can't really look at the LTV, but you need to see, okay, does it eventually for this, if I do outbound, it's different than inbound. The customers we are closing, do they really see the impact of the solution we are selling? That's one thing. And then we have still the entire marketing and sales costs, like the CAC payback? Does it make sense? Or is it twice or 5 times or 10 times more expensive than your other motion? Yeah, what are you doing? Are you keep investing in that motion, or say maybe we should turn it down and all this money we put into something what we know it works? So I think people are somehow a bit too naive, or a leader comes in, a VP of sales whatsoever from a previous job, and there they saw it's working, and the first thing they're doing, we need to start the GTM motion with partners, not really mathematically calculating the time, the what is needed, and the return on investment. And I think again, like if you now come towards like higher management, you need to have a strong case why you want to invest this, and when do you see return on investment. And if you don't have any of those numbers, I think the likelihood that they say go along and start this new motion is like very slim, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Yeah, true. No, very interesting. A lot of points to cover. We are actually at the end of it because I really want to limit it to 30 minutes. We are slightly over it. Any final tips? I mean, it's very disrespectful to call them tips because, of course, it needs more than a few tips to work on a GTM.
Again, like I think what really helped me is looking and talking with peers just to compare, because we, as let's say, just talking myself, sales leaders, you're so much in the bubble and so much focused on your day to day as a sales leader in your organization or your region, etc. And what I really see what works is sharing those insights. Hey, this is my GTM motion, and when it comes to partner, because this is my new motion, I really struggle with this and this. And by talking with peers, you really see that you get input and ideas which help you sooner decide whether you should go and continue with this, or maybe even consider stopping it. So I would hardly recommend, indeed. I mean, I always preaching for the choir because I'm a member of Pavilion, but any kind of those memberships really help if you talk with peers and benchmark. So that was one tip I would really give to the people.
Brilliant. Thank you. Very good way to finish this conversation. I really enjoyed it, Koen. Learned a lot, and thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, my pleasure.
Have a nice day. See you.
Cheers. Bye bye.